Hi everyone, welcome back. So now we have a good idea of what can cause disease, so those specific pathogens that we talked about in the previous sections. And we know how these pathogens are generally spread from person to person. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cover how our bodies actually respond to those pathogens, so what our bodies do to protect us. And our bodies fight these foreign invaders through what's called our immune system. And the immune system is the body's defense against pathogens, malfunctioning cells, and foreign particles. Now, I like to actually think of our immune system and our bodies sort of as a castle. And so you see our little cartoon here with our castle. So let's pretend that our castle is our bodies. Now, there are foreign pathogens or foreign invaders that are constantly trying to invade our bodies and make us sick. And our immune system's function is to try to keep them out. And there are three specific lines of defense that we're going to talk about. First, there are a number of physical and chemical barriers. And so these are something similar to physical barriers that we would expect to see in a castle. So something like a moat or a castle wall. And so these are actual physical barriers to preventing those pathogens from getting access to our bodies. Second, we have this thing called innate immunity. And so these are things like roaming patrols that are always searching for and on alert for specific pathogens that may have gotten past our first line of defense. And the third is a specific targeted response to a specific type of pathogen or invader. And we're going to go through each of these separate in the coming slides. And so part of our first line of defense is our skin. And so the dead outer layer of skin that's called the epidermis forms a type of shield against specific types of pathogens and invaders. And in fact, our skin, as well as functioning as a physical barrier, actually secretes chemicals that can also kill specific types of pathogens. Also included in our first line of defense are mucus and cilia. So as we breathe in, foreign particles and bacteria, obviously in the air, go into our noses and mouths, and they bump into mucus throughout our respiratory system and actually get stuck in that mucus. So mucus is thick and sticky for a specific reason. It's to actually trap those bacteria and foreign particles. Coupled with this mucus, hair-like structures that are called cilia actually work to sweep this mucus into the throat for coughing or swallowing. So coughing, sneezing are other ways that we actually get pathogens out of our bodies. And quick question for you related to our first line of defense. What's the first thing we do when we cut our finger or prick our finger or something like that? If you imagined that you stuck your finger in your mouth, you'd probably be right. It's kind of just a reactionary kind of movement that we have. So when we touch something sharp, we immediately take the point of our finger, for example, if we pricked our finger, and put it into our mouth. And this is specifically because saliva contains a lot of chemicals that are specifically designed to break down bacteria. Now, obviously, thousands of different types of bacteria can survive these chemicals, and so we still need to be careful. Another first line of defense is stomach acid. And so swallowed bacteria, say if we swallowed it with some type of food, are broken down by incredibly strong acids in the stomach that have the primary function of breaking down our food, but a secondary function is to protect from those specific types of bacteria. And this might be interesting to some of you. The stomach actually needs to produce a special coating of mucus, or that very, very strong stomach acid would eat straight through our stomach. And so actually, this is what is normally referred to as a stomach ulcer. And so it's where that stomach acid is actually worn through that special coating of mucus to your stomach tissue itself. And that's why it's so painful. Now, the second line of defense is our innate immunity, or something like the inflammatory response. And so we know, especially when we are discussing viruses, we know that some pathogens, multiply quickly and often release toxins that trigger the production of white blood cells. If you remember back to our circulatory system discussion, we called these white blood cells leukocytes. Now, there are several types of these white blood cells that have specific functions in our immune system that we're going to learn when we talk about the third line of defense. But for now, I just want you to be familiar with this type called a phagocyte. Now, phagocytes are a specific type of white blood cell or leukocyte that rush through blood vessels to infected areas and actually engulf the pathogens. So they kind of eat the pathogens up. And so they find the pathogen, they bind to them, and they swallow them up, and they degrade them within themselves. There are also other types like platelets, which move in to clot any specific openings. So we went through that in our circulatory system lecture. And there are also other forms of defense that have to do with enhancing our innate immunity. So these are things like fever. And so you may know that when we get sick, kind of one of the first signs is that our body temperature goes up. And so this is because when our body decides to increase its temperature, that's because a lot of these pathogens actually can't survive in that particular temperature change. So if it ups the temperature to, say, from 98.6, which is normal, to something like 100 or 101, a lot of bacteria and other pathogens have a hard time surviving or replicating themselves in that type of environment. And then also redness and swelling obviously results from increased blood flow to an infected area. And so you could probably think back when you had a cut or like a bug bite or something like that, you see a lot of redness and swelling because that is basically a sign that a lot of both blood and also white blood cells and other types of cells that are fighting infection are traveling to that site. And with that, we'll end this section of the first and second lines of defense of our immune system. And next, we're actually going to talk about our third line of defense, the targeted defense to a specific type of pathogen.